The Mexican army has killed powerful cartel boss El Mencho. He was one of the most wanted men in both Mexico and the United States. The US Embassy there said it provided intelligence to Mexican special forces for the operation. El Mencho's killing set off a wave of violence, with cartel members torching cars and gunmen blocking highways in more than half a dozen states in Mexico. US and Canadian airlines have cancelled dozens of flights to Mexico in response. The development comes as the Trump administration has pushed Mexico to intensify efforts against drug gangs trafficking fentanyl to the United States. All right, well, let's go to Mexico City now, and journalist Katie Silver joins us. Welcome to DW News, Katie. Good to see you again. Give us a sense of the magnitude of the killing of El Mencho.
It really can't be overstated. He's the most wanted man here in Mexico. He was among the most wanted men in the United States. And the two governments had put around about $35 million on his head when we combine the rewards from both governments. Very, very significant capture. In terms of this organisation, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, it is a very sophisticated cartel. It was formed back in 2009. It's known for using things like drones, rocket grenades, rocket launchers, grenades as part of their operations. And in fact, even some of these were located earlier today as well. And it was only earlier this month that President Trump declared the group a terrorist organisation. As part of all of this, we also know that they operate in 50 states across the US, smuggling vast quantities of drugs, be it fentanyl, but also cocaine and methamphetamines. We also know the group that was also very tied into organised crime as well. So a very significant operation today.
Sounds like it. What's known about how this killing came about? Because Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum in the past has cast doubt at going after cartel leaders as a strategy to deal with the issue, right?
That's correct. But of course, she has been under significant pressure from the US Trump administration, as you mentioned. So what we do know is it happened in Tapala, which is a city about a 2-hour drive southwest of Guadalajara, which is the capital city of the Jalisco state, where this cartel primarily operates. And what we know is it happened early this morning. It was meant as a recovery operation. They were hopeful to arrest him and bring him in for questioning. But when the Mexican army infiltrated where he was, there was a shootout that occurred. Altogether, about 7 members of the cartel were killed. And he was actually airlifted. He was injured. He wasn't killed in this shooting. He was airlifted towards Mexico City, but he actually died in the aircraft on the way. So a very significant development. As you say, we've heard from Claudia Sheinbaum previously criticising what they say is going after the kingpin or the head of cartels, saying that leads to a power vacuum which fractures cartels and leads to more violence and more conflict in the streets. If today is anything to go by, we have seen a real escalation and a real fear amongst many people here in Mexico. But as I say, a lot of pressure from the US to see something like this happen.
Well, tell us about the US's involvement in all of this, because the way I was reading it was in the Spanish media, Spanish-speaking world's media, that it was, they described it as sort of help from the US, right?
Yes, that's what we understand. So we heard from the Mexican embassy in Washington posting on X, basically saying that they had helped to share information. Exactly the level of US involvement isn't clear at this stage. It certainly doesn't seem to be akin to the situation in Venezuela, where we saw, a military raid carried out by US special forces. In this case, of course, it was the Mexican army. But there are a lot of questions as well about whether or not the weapons the Mexican army used. If you look on social media, there's a lot of questions about whether or not they came from the US. The exact level is unclear, but of course, this does come as both Canada and the US face increasing pressure from the Trump administration. Indeed, economic pressure. And of course, Mexico here has faced a lot of pressure when it comes to how it's going to help out its long-term ally, Cuba, and maintain that relationship with Washington. So today it does seem to be something of a forging of a friendship, I guess, there.
What's the security situation like now in Mexico?
In general, I would say there's a real feeling of fear. I'm relatively new to Mexico, but I've been speaking with people who have been here for years, and they say they haven't felt a level of fear around national security like they have this afternoon. Before, we've heard, for example, sirens. There have been helicopters overhead here in Mexico City, and this isn't even one of the areas allegedly affected. The US Embassy, for example, has told residents in places as far west as Puerto Vallarta, as far east as Cancun, so basically across the entire country, and as far north as Tijuana to shelter in place. Schools in many states are closed tomorrow. We have seen people in Sinaloa taking to the streets protesting against any potential escalation in violence. So there is definitely a real sense of fear here. And as I say, we're also hearing as well about roadblocks and many people going to different platforms and apps, and you can see where roadblocks have occurred. Some of these because cartels have burnt out cars in order to prevent military operations, in order to prevent people being able to cross into various elements of different cities. So there has certainly been a real sense of fear here.
Now, flights have been cancelled going into Mexico from the US and Canada. And of course, tourism is a pretty important sector to the Mexican economy. Are there concerns that this could have a big hit to tourism, particularly ahead of the Football World Cup, of course, later this year?
Yeah, so in terms of the flights that have been cancelled, most of these are going to either the resort town of Puerto Vallarta, which is on the coast of the state of Jalisco, as well as Guadalajara. And there were scenes earlier today of people fleeing the airport in Guadalajara, very, very fearful. You mentioned, of course, the World Cup. Guadalajara, a city of about 1.4 million people. It is one of 3 cities here in the country that are hosting World Cup games, along with Monterrey and Mexico City. There is certainly fears around what all of this might mean when it comes to tourism. Already we're seeing people asking about what they're going to do with their trips. We're hearing as well, as I mentioned, Puerto Vallarta in complete lockdown. So many tourists there wondering about how they're going to get water, food into their Airbnbs, those sorts of things. A lot of posts on social media about that. So there certainly is a sense of fear. And of course, the World Cup is only a few months away. And as I say, one of these games occurring in the very stronghold of the Jalisco cartel.
All right, we'll leave it there, Katie. But great to get that update from Mexico City. Katie Silver, journalist, joining us from Mexico. Thanks so much.